Because I got to tell you the truth, folks. I got to tell you the truth. When it comes to bullshit, big time, major league bullshit, you have to stand in awe of the all-time champion of false promises and exaggerated claims, religion. No contest. No contest. Religion easily has the greatest bullshit story ever told. Think about it. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you.
Welcome to episode 26 of the Exoteric Show. So we've made it 25 episodes, and I wanted to take a look back at where I started and see if things look a little bit different. So here we go. I've assembled at least what I think are the tenets of a receptive mind. And I'll go into those in just a minute, but before doing so, a couple of notes. Tell you what, I gotta be honest. I think that's some pretty good progress. So even that might be worth a subscribe or a like or even a share. So before we continue with our reading of Lysander Spooner's Vices Are Not Crimes, A Vindication of Moral Liberty, I think some words from Aristotle will help set an appropriate tone for today's episode. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Mr. Spooner, the floor is yours. So we are on section 16 of Vices Are Not Crimes, and this is a pretty long section. So I'm going to summarize what the general theme is, and then I'll select a couple of quotes. So Spooner is basically, he starts with this question: is there no right on the part of government to arrest the progress of those who are bent on self-destruction? And goes on to say that, of course, there's not. Then he gets into the question of sanity and how we judge the insane versus the sane. And I want to hit a couple of those quick items. And so long as they are sane, they must be permitted to control themselves and their property, and to be their own judges as to where their vices will finally lead them. It may be hoped by the lookers-on in each individual case that the vicious person will see the end to which he is tending and be induced to turn back. But if he chooses to go on to what other men call destruction, it must be permitted to do so. And all that can be said of him, so far as this life is concerned, is that he has made a great mistake in his search after happiness. As to what may be his condition in another life, that is a theological question with which the law, in this world, has no more to do with than it has with any other theological question, touching men's condition in a future life. If a person really does become insane, non compos mentis, incapable of reasonable discretion or self-control, it is then a crime, on the part of other men, to give to him or sell to him the means of self-injury. There are no crimes more easily punished, no cases in which juries would be more ready to convict, than those where a sane person should sell or give to an insane one any article with which the latter was likely to injure himself. Now, if you join me for episode 25, you'll know that it was the first part of our exploration of religion as a form of mind control, which I'll wrap up today. I would encourage you to go back and watch that episode as it provides some important foundational material. Now, before we jump into today's material, I want to spend just a minute on an extremely important concept that is used frequently as a mode of communicating information, and that is allegory. And in the clip from last time, Jordan Maxwell repeatedly referred to all cultural religious traditions, the Bible and Jesus, as an allegory, and in his words, it is trying to teach us something. As an example, what is the Matrix trilogy? I don't think the writers intended for us to take what was on the screen as being literal. I think they meant to use the tools of allegory, metaphor, and analogy to tell the story of, well, obviously something I wasn't expecting. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I don't think so. I think what it was really trying to communicate is that our condition is clearly human slavery, and what has to be done to stop it, which is each of us having the courage to end it. Yes, one person at a time. So last time we ended on the topic of astrotheology, and to quickly recap, that is the presentation of astrological concepts in a metaphorical framework. In 3 of the major religions of the world, these appear as the cults of the sun, or the solar cult, the cult of the moon, or the lunar cult, and the cult of the stars and planets, or the stellar cult. So the solar cult, the cult of the sun, is Christianity. The lunar cult, or the cult of the moon, is Judaism. And the stellar cult, or the cult of the stars and planets, is Islam. So now let's take a look at the exoteric versus esoteric expressions of the Trinity. Recall that exoteric and esoteric represent 2 versions of the story, with exoteric being information meant for the masses, which ordinary people can understand, and esoteric meaning the information which is reserved or hidden or occulted, only for those who have the capacity to comprehend it. Christianity is very clearly woven into the solar cult. Now consider this, that the Trinity we know of as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is an exoteric representation of the 3 components of consciousness, which are thoughts, emotions, and actions. So you have the creative aspect, which is the creative principle of Father in the Trinity seen in thoughts, then the feminine principle of Mother in emotions, and finally the masculine principle of child or son seen in actions. So here we are, back again at the issue of what is perceived, or taught to be perceived, as within us, which is consciousness, versus outside of us, which is religion. And I think we can agree that people or groups seeking control of others benefit from obfuscating or intentionally confusing the topic so that people don't understand what they are capable of, independent and apart from any third party that claims to be necessary to mediating their spiritual journey. And this is out in the open because it's precisely how religious organizations define themselves, as required intermediaries between you and a spiritual presence. But I just don't understand this, given that the Bible seems very explicit on this point. In Luke chapter 17, verse 21, it says, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." And my admittedly limited understanding of this subject has pointed to this dynamic being present in all other cultural and theological religions, just like the flood story and many others. Let's go farther, shall we? The deeper aspect of the esoteric story is found in the Hermetic tradition, which states, "as above, so below," meaning that things are similar across scale and application. Microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm. Just as when the actions of individuals are scaled and applied in the macro, moral behavior has the natural law reward of freedom, and immoral behavior carries the natural law consequence of suffering. And if we are able to understand ourselves well enough to choose the path of moral behavior, I think we would experience an enormous leap along the path to enlightenment. And that is arriving at the understanding that what we are is infinite consciousness, having an experience in a physical domain, in a physical body, in a physical world. Those who truly have this worldview will not, they cannot, allow themselves to be controlled by cultural or any other type of religion, cult, or dogma, or any of the other techniques of mind control that I've been discussing. And that is because they don't see themselves as their bodies, and therefore have no hesitation at putting their lives at risk, particularly where their sovereignty is involved. The tyranny we live under would never exist with large numbers of people in that mindset. Can you imagine someone in that state being presented with opportunities to hand over foundational elements of their sovereignty? No way. What if we tried a little experiment and asked damn near anyone to quit their job because it was requiring them to behave immorally? But my family would be thrown into the streets and starve. Right. And compare that to the response from someone with true enlightenment and ascended consciousness. It would probably go along the lines of, "My sovereignty and that of my fellow human beings is my imperative. so I would rather be homeless and starve than act immorally. Try controlling that. And I'm not just preaching this because it's hard for me to get beyond associating with my own existence and my own body, which is the primary source of this problem. But everywhere I look, that's exactly what awakened and critically thinking sources say. So at the close of the last episode, I gave a little foreshadowing of what I'd like to transition into now. And if you think I'm a heretic now, by all means, join me in the next episode, where I'll share a theory of Christianity that is sure to rock your world. I'll whet your appetite with this. All roads lead to Rome. So I want to spend some time presenting information to you that takes the same subtopics of Christianity and the Bible, just as examples, and offers entirely different vantage points than the exoteric narrative. It may be, I would probably say it will be, new to you. It was to me. And depending upon your beliefs, you may find it provocative and even angering. Feel however you do, but please don't make the fundamental mistake, which is committing the logical fallacy of associating your feelings and preferences with the validity and veracity of the information. So here it is, and I'll pose it in the form of an admittedly run-on question. Is it possible that Christianity was the creation of a Roman Caesar and his family, with the intended goal of putting down internal Jewish rebellions and resulting in the Bible, which shares uncanny similarities to historical events occurring at that time and recorded by a Roman Jewish historian who, after initially resisting the Roman Empire, fully defected to it and was then granted Roman citizenship and other benefits? In fairness, let me repeat that.
Is it possible that Christianity was the creation of a Roman Caesar and his family, with the intended goal of putting down internal Jewish rebellions and resulting in the Bible, which shares uncanny similarities to historical events occurring at that time and recorded by a Roman Jewish historian who, after initially resisting the Roman Empire, fully defected to it and was then granted Roman citizenship and other benefits?
Well, let's see what Joseph Atwill has to say about that question, since that's exactly what he claims in his book, Caesar's Messiah. And here's a collection of what he offers to support his contentions.
So at the very onset of the Roman control of Judea, they tried to interject Rome into the Jewish religion so that the authority structure would be pro-Roman, and then they could thereby keep the country pacified and keep it as a tax-producing region. What they were hoping to do was to essentially take Jewish scripture and interpret it in such a way that the Messianic movement would not rebel against Rome. The symbolism in the Gospels has simply been misunderstood. It's incredible, but it just has not been grasped, even though it's fairly straightforward. People look at it as either religious literature or as having a basis in history, and they attempt to understand it through those frameworks. This gets you nowhere. I noticed there were strange parallels between Titus and Jesus. I had no agenda against Christianity. I certainly didn't think it would lead to a new understanding of the Gospels. The Gospels are actually a little puzzle. And the puzzle is simply, who is the Son of Man that Jesus is envisioning? The Christian scholars, and I think the Jewish scholars, have always accepted that it's Jesus himself. He's predicting that he will return, the coming of the Christ. Everyone is looking for this. Well, the fact is, that's not really what the authors were talking about. They were talking about the literal individual who would encircle Jerusalem with the wall, raise the temple, and lay low the Galilean towns. It's Titus. As soon as you take this perspective and start to do scholarship, Titus just pops right out of the Gospels.
Pretty interesting, huh? Dare I say, compelling? If you have an open mind and, as we heard from Aristotle, an educated mind, I highly recommend Caesar's Messiah, and I'll include a link in the description. So let's forge ahead. Given the last episode where we heard Jordan Maxwell's thoughts on astrotheology, and that the basis of all world religions is the battle between light and darkness, meaning daylight and nighttime, resulting in the allegorical presentation of physical heavenly bodies as God, is it possible that the official narrative may be lacking? Or just plain wrong? And perhaps intentionally wrong, in the case of Joseph Atwill's theory? All right, I'm feeling it, so let's go for the hat trick of heresy. Here is Eric von Daniken.
So that's why in the Bible we find many descriptions about extraterrestrials. We simply translated it wrong. So Adam and Eve were a creation by an artificial mutation made out of the family tree of our primitive ancestors.
And I went a little longer than I expected last time, so let's go ahead and put this one in the books. Before we have Thomas Paine put the wood to religion with our final quote, I want to again stress that just like with my comments about natural law, objective morality, and the other foundational knowledge I discuss, I believe the ability to hear and evaluate the information. In this case, it's hearing these alternate explanations out and not being triggered. Arriving at that level of mental receptivity is the real battle, not having the correct conclusion about a specific question or topic. There's one thing I can tell you, and that's after researching for this episode, I can confirm that Thomas Paine's words will definitely be making appearances here more often. So get ready for this one. The most detestable wickedness, the most horrid cruelties, and the greatest miseries that have afflicted the human race have had their origin in this thing called revelation, or revealed religion. It has been the most destructive to the peace of man since man began to exist. Among the most detestable villains in history, you could find no one worse than Moses, who gave an order to butcher the boys, to massacre the mothers, and then rape the daughters. One of the most horrible atrocities found in the literature of any nation. I would not dishonor my Creator's name by attaching it to this filthy book. Whoa. So come on back next time and we'll get into the 13th technique of mind control, the use of subversive symbols. And that will be the penultimate discussion as we close in on our 14th and final technique of mind control, false flag attacks. And don't judge. The opportunity to use penultimate is rare, just like the awakened individual. I'll see you next time, and remember to always do your own thinking. Be well. Astrotheology is the presentation of astrological concepts in a metaphor. So Christianity is verily, and if we are able to understand, and that is because they don't see themselves and therefore have no hesitation at putting their rives, come on. Can you imagine someone in that state being presented with opportunities to hand over foundational? The response would probably be So at the close of the last episode, I gave a little foreshadowing of what I'd like to these non-mainstream narratives. Is it possible that